Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Philly Old Head Review. Today, our guest is a business coach and consultant, Mr. Ismail. He's from, well, I'm going to let him give a little bit of background about himself, but he's currently in Saudi Arabia. And I met him during my time there. So without further ado, Mr. Ismail, introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Ismail A. Rahman, originally from Jersey, born in Newark, grew up in East Orange. I don't know how deep you want to go into the backstory, but, grew up in East Orange. That was an interesting childhood. And when I went off to college, I basically never went back. I went to University of Delaware. And from there, eventually I ended up in Texas. And from there, I skipped town and ended up here in Saudi Arabia.
All right. So what was your segue into getting into Saudi Arabia? You went there on business. You was a lot of people go there. Westerners go there as teachers. What was your segue to get over there?
Actually, the reason that I wanted to leave, so I'll tell you that first, right? Remember Parade magazine in the Sunday newspaper? They had that. That insert, right? All right. So I'm reading Parade magazine, and there was a cover story. It had a Jewish woman in the robe and holding the scrolls of the Torah, and the headline said, "When the call comes later in life," and it profiled 6 people, 3 Jews, 3 Christians, who were all over the age of 40, had high-paying jobs, making north of $100,000 a year, and they all left all of that to go study their religion. So I remember being frustrated at not being able to understand Arabic and thinking, like, it can't be that daggone hard. So I read that supplement. I was like, you know what? I'm getting out of here. So I had some people try to talk me off the ledge. They're like, well, you make a lot of money working at Microsoft. You should stay there and just find another way to do what you want to do.
Right.
At the time, they had the Mahad in Virginia. So I tried to go there. And then it closed because something happened and they closed at halfway ran or something. So I went to Egypt.
Right.
And I went to Egypt with no other intention other than I'm going to learn me some Arabic.
Okay.
And I had a bunch of money I took with me, and as we were nearing a year, it started, running a little low. But then suddenly I got a job offer to work in Saudi Arabia. So I was like, well, okay. I didn't even know that I had applied for a job in Saudi Arabia. So it was a teaching job. Basically 6 degrees of separation. A friend submitted my resume. Mm-hmm. I started getting calls, but it was right after 9/11. So I couldn't get my visa while I was in Egypt, back to the States for a year. And then I came here, and so teaching was the bridge because I didn't speak Arabic well enough to be able to get an IT job. Mm-hmm. So I had to teach. So that's what I did.
All right. So you're like bigger than the average size Saudi. You're like 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah.
What, 300 and...
Yeah.
300 and what are you, about 310, 315?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
So...
You tend to be on the large size.
Yeah, so when you first got there, I'm sure they were looking at you like, what did we get ourselves into?
Well, people ask me about Shaquille O'Neal. I'm like, right, you have no idea how large that human is.
So how was it? How was the transforming from, America to Saudi Arabia? You hear a lot of stories about African Americans going to, the Arab lands or leaving, whatever the case may be. So how was it for you?
Well, Egypt helped prepare me, you know what I mean? Because when I was in Egypt, so I was there from January 2001 to like October. So that helped temper my expectations a little bit. Because usually what happens is we're looking for utopia, and then we find like real humans who do real human stuff, and then we get really disappointed.
Right.
So after having been in Egypt, when I came here, I was like, okay, I'm pretty prepared for what I think I might expect to find in people's personalities and stuff. Although, to be honest, some stuff you're never really prepared for, but
Right.
you know, you adjust. And what I've found is that it's kind of like being in America, in that people have their preconceived notions, right, based on what you look like and where you're from, the language you speak. But once you can prove to them that you're really bringing value to the table and you're the smartest guy in the room, it may not completely change the perception, but at least in the interaction, they don't come at you as hard as they were gonna. You know what I mean? So you can kind of buffer that a little bit.
Right. So getting into your teaching career, how did you go from that to becoming a business coach and mentor and so forth and so on?
Okay. See, with respect to business, okay, so teaching was, I just taught because it was the easiest way to get into Saudi Arabia, to be honest. So, you know, with respect to business, I started my first 2 businesses when I was 8. And I was starting them off and on ever since then. So the jobs that I had in the States, I was frequently in management positions. Microsoft, I wasn't, but that was just a great opportunity, and I didn't care because they paid me so much money, it didn't matter.
Right.
But up until then, I was always in at least a supervisory, if not a management position. I was helping to start startups, you know, I was a general manager in some places, and you know what I mean? So I had all of that experience with me. And initially, when I wanted to come here, those are the type roles that I was applying for. But again, because of the language barrier, I couldn't even get interviewed. Well, after I was here, I recognized that with the expenses of living here, because if you want to live relatively comfortably, it can be pretty expensive. And unfortunately, I was dumb enough to sign the worst teaching contract in history. I'm not going to tell you how bad it was, but there were taxi drivers who were making more than me. All right.
Yeah.
So, what ended up happening though.
Was that Minarat job?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Rotten.
I got out real quick.
It was rotten. All right. I did a 6-year bid. And anyway, but
I did 90 days.
Oh, you did? Oh, you bounced that quick.
Yeah, I got out.
All right, mashallah. But what happened was I was teaching at Berlitz in the evening, and I had a private student, and this private student was like, "Man, why are you teaching English? You're way smarter than this. Like, you should be making this kind of money doing this and this and this." So as we're talking, you know, he asked me about my background, so I told him about my background. So he was like, "Bro, I'm gonna give you some advice. At the minimum, you should get certified in project management or maybe quality," because he was doing his master's in quality and eventually he got a PhD. So I'm listening to him, I'm like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And then, but you know, day-to-day stuff happens and you kind of forget about it. And I got ADD, so I'm easily distracted anyway. But what ended up happening was eventually something triggered my memory of that conversation. So I went and I got certified. I got a Six Sigma certification.
Right.
And then I realized how much I missed being in business and in the corporate environment. So I said, all right, I just made an exit plan, you know. I said, what do I need to do to get out of here? So I asked my guy, his name's Abdulaziz. He said, well, if you get an MBA, then I'll hire you. Said, okay, no problem. So I got an MBA. And he hired me before I was finished. And then I had a really bad accounting teacher. So I got a master's in finance too, right? But with that, what ended up happening is I was meeting more people, more opportunities started to present themselves.
Right.
And the way it started was, you know, I was like, at the place where Abdulaziz was, I said, let me just come down there and help out. let me just, do some stuff with, so he worked he was the general manager of Sunduk Mi'awiyah, the Centennial Fund, right? So they're the first organization in Saudi Arabia to support entrepreneurship.
Okay.
They started by a royal decree, right? So I went down there just to do a little, coaching, a little consulting, just to get out of teaching for a minute and just to show them that I could add value. And then they hired me on a consulting basis. And then they asked if I wanted to work full time. I was like, yeah, sign me up, and that was it. So alhamdulillah, that was 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And so I have basically been out of the teaching scene with the exception of, Aviation Australia. But for the most part, that was it for my teaching career.
Okay, so what type of challenges do you find in being a business coach and a consultant, especially being in a place like, that's not your home, even though you've been there for a long time? But what type of challenges do you find compared to the United States as you're over in a Middle Eastern country?
I think there's several challenges. So, for example, we have the freedom back at home to decide to be whatever it is that we want to be. Mm-hmm. And here it's not like that. So people get into careers because of their GPA, and they very often don't have a choice, or they don't have a range of choices. Sometimes the choice is you can either do this or do this, and that's it. Like, you're choosing between two things, right? And maybe you don't like either one of them. So sometimes, you have people who, this is what they had to major in, this is what they had to study, they didn't have a choice. Also, there's not a lot of growth mindset. And I think a lot of that is probably just, cultural due to the region. Mm-hmm. But what that means is that very often people have fossilized ideas about the way they want to do things, what they think is appropriate, and you can't coach them to a different decision. So, when we're coaching, very often the approach is that, we ask you questions and lead you to discover the path that is most conducive to the outcome that you're seeking, right? So that's the way we usually do it. And then sometimes when that's not working, you have to be more direct and make suggestions. But usually for the client, we want the client to, have the breakthrough and then recognize at least the decision about which way to go. And then after that, you can help them with tools. So that's the way we prefer to do it. But here, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to literally take people by the hand and, say, do this and do this and do this and do this. But then instead of feeling empowered to go ahead and take the bull by the horns, work on these suggestions and do the implementation, now I've got to do the implementation, basically, right? If you have people who are inexperienced and they lack confidence to go ahead and try whatever it is that you're suggesting, then they won't actually do it. And they want you there every step of the way. So I have found quite a bit of that. And then, and I think where we're from, because you get exposed to more and you're encouraged to try different things, mm-hmm. Although you may not have experience with something, very often we meet people who say, okay, well, if you show me how to do it and get me started, then I'll go ahead and take the rest.
Right.
So because there's one client, I think I've been mentoring this kid for probably the better part of 5 years. And, Bruce Arians, the coach of the Buccaneers, mm-hmm. He has the saying, because he likes throwing the ball deep, right?
Right.
And when he has quarterbacks don't like to throw the ball deep, he got the saying, he says, no risk it, no biscuit. So you can't be risk averse. Well, I got this one kid, he's Saudi, right? He studied in Florida. He has an engineering degree from FIT, Florida Institute of Technology.
Right.
But he is so risk averse. He can't seem to pull the trigger on anything. I can't tell you how many business plans I've written for him, how much market research, how many financial models I've done it all. And then as soon as it comes time to write that check to, invest in whatever, or to buy a franchise or whatever, he can't do it because it's the unknown of what if it doesn't work out. What are people going to say? I'm going to be an embarrassment to my family.
Right.
But like right now, you're imprisoned by those expectations. So you're not even really living, you know what I mean? But because culture is so strong and those familial expectations, you find people who they just, they're very linear in their approach to things.
I actually just had this a similar conversation with someone yesterday about being continually in planning mode. You're always talking about what you want to do, this, that, and the other. We've been planning for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You've never pulled the trigger. You have this, like you said, apprehension about pulling that trigger, just diving into the business, so there's never any reward because you haven't taken a risk. So I understand that. Do you find that it's more prevalent there? And do you find any entrepreneurial opportunities for expatriates? Has it grown a bit, or is it, still quite stagnant and Saudi dependent?
Okay, so with respect to the first question, the general mindset. Okay, so with Vision 2030, one of the things that they wanted to do was inculcate in the general population the entrepreneurial spirit. All right, so they've got different organizations set up that are supposed to help prepare young Saudis, young being between 18 and 35, to start ventures. So they started the SME Authority. There's rumors that there's going to be a VC fund, which hasn't actually happened yet. I mean, the government sanctioned one. They have some small networks of angel investors. They don't have a formal VC fund yet. They do have corporate VC. So like STC, for example, Saudi Telecom, they do have a corporate VC project where, based upon what they project market share to be and potential exits for tech-based or tech-enabled companies, they will invest. And the last I heard, it was a small fund. It's like 25 million reals, which is nothing in the VC world,
Right.
So they're trying to do something. It's just not a whole lot. Opportunities for expats, the hype is one thing, but the reality is something very different. Mm-hmm. So you can get, I remember when they started the entrepreneur visa, right? So the entrepreneur visa meant that you can come here and prospect opportunities, but you couldn't actually do business with it. You would have to leave and come back with a different visa. So the reality is that unless you are going to start a venture that is going to be heavily teched, right? In any form of tech, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to create jobs for Saudis. And they want, like, even at the startup phase, you to be able to employ between 10 and a dozen Saudis, right? In order to get approved. So it's very difficult to get approved, right? Because most of us, when we have, like, as expats, when we're looking to solve problems, number one, we're looking to solve problems that we know well. And the problems that we know best are problems that are rooted or based in the places that we have lived the longest. Mm-hmm. And where we think we might be able to influence the outcome. So that doesn't typically tend to be here. So if you're looking for FDI, foreign direct investment, then that's not really the way things are set up here, because in order to do that, now you've got to come with, a liquid investment of $1 million, and you have to guarantee certain economic impact, and then certain other structures have to be in place. So if you are a corporation, then that's fine. But at the startup stage, it's not really set up for external, expats to come in and launch a startup here. If you're already here and you have a Saudi partner, then it's possible. However, you just have to make sure that you've got the legal structures to protect you so that if there is an exit, then you get what is equitable.
Several people approached me about opening up a real cheesesteak place over there. I know they have them there, but they're not like the Philly cheesesteak.
Not a good idea, bro. I can tell you now, not a good idea. But see, here's the thing, right? You got to remember, number one, in this country, because it's so hot and there's not a lot to do, there's two things people always do, which is eat and shop, right? Mm-hmm. But so there's always a bubble in the food and beverage industry. And I was a consultant for a company in the industry like that has a large market share in seafood. But one of the things that I found is that you can open a restaurant like in the morning, right? Have cash flow by the evening, technically be profitable in 90 days and be out of business in 3 years. And you see this all the time, right? So if you look at a lot of the franchises that have come through here, it's boom and bust, right? At first, when there's the hype around there's an American restaurant, right? We're going to go and the line's wrapped around the building. And then 6 months later, the place is empty. And you have to remember that culturally, these people don't eat sandwiches like that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So even like Quiznos has opened under 2 different franchisees here and gone out of business, every time that I've seen it. Subway, because of the guy who owns Subway also owns other stuff, he's not really beat about Subway, but Subway does horrible business here. Unless you find it on the campus of a university or a hospital, Subway struggles. People don't eat sandwiches like that. So to do a Philly cheesesteak sandwich here, like for example, there's Charlie's, there was Firehouse Steakery.
Steakhouse. I mean the steakhouse place, yeah.
Yeah, right. They struggle. Now, although I appreciate the food, the reality is if you're doing business where your target customer is going to be an expat. So you're talking about 10% of the population living on annual contracts. And year to year, you don't know if they're going to be here, especially given the direction of Vision 2030. So, 10% in any given year, 10% of your target audience, which is only 10% of the population. So now we're down to 100. There's turnover every year. Right. So you can't plan a long-term business strategy that way. Now, if someone's got money they want to invest and they want you to come manage it for a while and you're going to get bonuses, whatever. Like I said, you can probably make it work for 3 years or so, but usually the paper line of demarcation for these kind of businesses is around 3 years.
Well, how do you foresee the expat population moving forward with the Vision 2030?
Dwindling. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest, so we're legislated out of like everything. So I was being considered for a C-suite position at the place where I told you I was a business consultant for the F&B company. But I couldn't get one. I couldn't get it because the same year the legislation came that all C-suite had to be Saudi. Right. Okay. So now you're not going to find senior executives who are non-Saudi in most places unless they happen to be a multinational. If it's a multinational company, they get certain exemptions. But if it's a Saudi-owned company, it can't be that way. Can't be in HR, right? So most corporate stuff, even the finance department, the accounting department, all that has to be Saudized. So now there are fewer opportunities outside of education. In education, what you're finding now is if it's specific to English language teaching, there are a number of Saudis coming back with doctorates, with master's degrees, and people are getting hip to the fact that you don't have to speak English like an American in order to be able to teach English. So for the women, that's happening more frequently because, for women, Saudi women, it's easier, right? You got a job, you're going to be off work by 3. You can go home and have babies or make babies or take care of your kids or whatever you do, take care of your husband, and you get the summers off. But not that many Saudi men are doing that because, they're just not interested in education. When they go study abroad, they're looking at, engineering, medicine, or business, right? So for men, expat men, if you're in the field of English language teaching, there's still going to be opportunities, but they will dwindle, and eventually either they're going to find lower cost alternatives, you know what I mean? Like, from specific countries, you know what I mean? Or the opportunities left will be in the international schools. And so as like what's happening now is in these prep year programs, salaries are coming down, and they're coming down such that they're starting to match what people are paying in international schools.
Right.
So if you want to stay, you're being pushed out of the prep year programs, you go to an international school, but there is a completely different environment. Like, I mean, if you're in a prep year program, you're not really worrying about lesson plans and whatnot. You know what I mean? There's a bit of that, but not too much. You don't have to deal with parents. If you're in an international school where some kid's entire future, what he's going to be able to major at, what university he's going to get accepted to, and based on how much parents are paying for tuition, they ride you. And it is a job that even after you walk out the building, like, you're still on the clock. Now they got WhatsApp groups for parents to contact you all hours of the night. They're using Moodle and LMS systems. It's a lot of pressure. And quite honestly, the justification of the salary doesn't make it worth it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get ahead of the game and leave when I did. Because a lot of people ask me, I thought you liked it over there. I said, I did, but economy changed. You got to make different plans. Things ain't always what they seem to be. You know what I mean? And unless you have that type of money where you're not solely dependent on a salary, you got to make plans. So what are you looking to do as the changes move on, and possibly diversifying or moving your business back to America or Britain? I know you have a British business partner. What are your plans looking like?
Well, right now I'm just grabbing low-hanging fruit. You know what I mean? Because there's still some available.
Right.
And based on relationships I've built, there's a sizable bag that I can grab between now and August. So inshallah, that's the plan. I'm going to go ahead and grab it. It's out there. And it's like people want to give it to me, so I might as well take it. However, with respect to my business, the reality is that there are certain challenges to me doing business here that are nearly insurmountable, right? So because of that, I'm going to have to transition back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, that'll happen in this 2021. But the good news is that, when I'm there, I'm setting things up now. As a matter of fact, I was delayed getting on this call because of the call that I was on just before that. So, I don't want to say too much, but I'll put it like this. When I started iVibes, right? So the name of the business that I own solely and wholly is called iVibes. It's Virtual Integrated Business and Entrepreneurship Solutions. When I started it, there were certain things that I had in mind that I wanted to be able to do. So I wanted to be able to provide tech solutions for entrepreneurs. I'm having those built right now. I wanted to be able to have a co-working space. I'm getting a co-working space. I wanted to be able to have a coding lab and a robotics lab. Those are in the works now. I want to have an accelerator, and I'm trying to finalize an agreement right now to run a full-time accelerator. So with that, like everything that I want to do with the business, when I launched it officially 5 years ago, all those opportunities are being presented to me now, but I've got to do them from the States. So that's where I'm going.
What type of individuals are you looking for when you come back to assist you in growing your business?
Really, Okay, so I think you probably heard that in the past year or 18 months, you've got companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook talking about actually announcing that they're moving away from degree-based hiring. And
Yes,
they're going to,
Tesla. I heard Tesla. Yeah,
right. So, um, so
it's one
partially,
of the people who were good in playing video games.
exactly, right. So for me, as a matter of fact, I just had a budget conversation too about my staff. But for me, I'm looking for people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, who are willing to learn and hustle. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because ultimately, by Allah's permission, these opportunities that I have for my business now because of my hustle, you know what I mean? Because of the things that I was willing to do, willing to try, and the risks I've been willing to take. And then also the value that I've been willing to give people without asking for anything in return.
Right.
And I think that has a large part to play with it. You know what I mean? So, for example, like I said, at the Centennial Fund, when I first started there, it was a volunteer basis. I just went down there to add value. I didn't ask for any money. Let me come down there and help somebody. You know what I mean? And then that is the thing that precipitated my exit from education and transition into corporates. And even now, just to tell you about this opportunity, it happened because a lady found me based on my IG posts and said, "Hey, how much is a coaching package with you?" So I said, "Well, let's have a discovery and we'll talk about it." And in talking to her, I was like, "You know what? I don't want money. I will do it for you free of charge." Now, it's not something I normally do, but based on that conversation, I recognized that it would be better for both of us, more mutually beneficial, if I simply gained access to her network.
Right.
So she agreed. And based upon that, now, inshallah, within 6 months, I'll have a full-time accelerator, a co-working space, coding lab, robotics lab, you know what I mean? Like all of that stuff that I've wanted, all of that, inshallah, will launch in 2021. And then in addition to that, I'll still have, other stuff, with respect to coaching and mentoring and online programs and what have you.
All right. So last but not least, coming from the Brick City, East Orange area.
Right, there's the building, baby.
Yeah. What type of message, and just, listening to your story and the path that you've taken, what type of message could you send to the youth? Now, I know you've been away for a while, but you kind of know what's going on. What type of message can you give to the youth, knowing your background and the things that you've overcome and where you've come from, and trying to look at today's youth? What type of message can you give them to show them that they can be successful and overcome certain challenges that exist today to become successful in business or whatever they would like to be successful in?
I think the first thing is you have to understand what is possible. So, when I was growing up, sad to say, it's kind of stereotypical, but, I was given a constant message that whatever you decide to do, you're getting out this house when you're 18.
Right.
Right. So and it was said kind of tongue in cheek at times, and other times it was a bit more serious, but I understood that I wasn't living rent free after I turned 18.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as I'm growing up, I'm thinking I have two choices. I can go to the army or I can sell drugs. And I more or less had wrapped my head around that that's what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening, alhamdulillah, my mother, Rahman A, she sent me to a different high school. So I was going to go to East Orange High, right? So I'd have been in class with Tretch and KG and, Vin Rock, and you know what I mean? Like that would have been my life. And if had I gone there, then the other distractions of what happens when you grow up in an urban environment, might have got me. she decided to send me to a private Catholic boys' high school. And she told me that I had to take an entrance exam, and then based on who accepts you, you pick the school you want to go to. So, I hadn't even thought about high school like that. I just assumed I was going to East Orange High, and I was figuring, all right, so after you get jumped about a half dozen times your freshman year, then you know what I mean, like you get your rep, and then you can get through the rest of high school okay. And I've already got this worked out. I'm like, well, you know what I mean, like when they lock kids up here, depending on what they get you for, you might only do like 3 months in Rikers and you'd be back home. Like I'm already going through these scenarios because I'm thinking, because that's what I see around me. But when I got to this high school, I went to Seton Hall Prep. All right, so it was on at the time it was on the campus of Seton Hall University, and I saw kids going to college, and everybody around me was talking about going to college, and I was like, "Why are you going to college?" And it's weird because, like, okay, my mother was a doctor, and then she became a lawyer, so obviously she had an education. And my grandmother that raised me was a school nurse, and then I had an aunt who was an English, but no one ever talked about it.
You
Right?
just saw it as being, it's just regular,
So I didn't know, but like all of my influences in the neighborhood, nobody was going to college. People was trying to get papers. So I was confused. And I ain't gonna lie, the culture shock of being in that high school, I had a 1.8 GPA after my sophomore year.
Right.
So at that point, college wasn't even looking like a possibility. But as I started to get recruited to play football, my perspective changed. I was like, well, I might be able to get out of here, like, and never come back. So, they say that you are the composite of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So I would say to young people, the first thing you have to do is kind of look at the people that you spend the most time with, right? If you look at these 5 or 10, or you expand it to 20 people, if you look at these people and you're not inspired by what they're doing and what they're striving for, what they've accomplished and what they hope to do, then you've got to change the people that you spend time with, because it really does affect your mindset. Mm-hmm. Like I thought I had no options. Like I thought I was going to be on Rikers and, in and out of jail like half of my family. And I had no reasonable expectation that wouldn't happen to me. And, as I look back on it, I admit I was going through life as a victim. I was going to be a victim of my circumstances, of my, surroundings, of my upbringing. Like I had no choice in the matter, but that's what young people have to understand. You do have a choice, right? Now, it may not always be easy to separate yourself from the people that you've been around, or to extricate yourself from, certain types of behavior because they become so normalized to you. But the reality is, they have these institutions that are filled up all the time, and there's no shortage of bodies to go in them. But the worst thing is when people come out of them, they can never really have a quote unquote normal life, because now they're always going to be marginalized, right? You've got a stigma, you're an ex-con, you're a felon. So now you're automatically cut off from opportunities that other people have simply because they weren't in those circumstances. So you have to look at the people that you spend time around. And if you don't find, and those people, like I said, people to motivate you, to inspire you, to encourage you, to support you, you've got to try through community groups, through religious groups, to find a mentor. If you can find a mentor who, that you can take as a confidant, who can kind of give you some guidance, help you make better choices, and give you something to work towards. This is key, and all of us need mentors. And alhamdulillah, one of the things I think that's helped me is, as I look back on, I've always had mentors at different stages of my life who maybe at the time they didn't realize that that's what they were to me, right. But I can identify that now, mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just having someone who will listen, who understands the struggle and won't judge, and then kind of show you that there might be another path that ultimately could be better for you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking time out with me you're 8 hours ahead. So I know it's late. Talking about 1:44 in the morning. But I know how y'all doing Saudi. It's that's breakfast time. But
Yeah, we drink tea and kahwa.
yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Stay in touch. And I hope everybody can take your message and be inspired by your transformation from, where you came from to where you are. And hopefully we can send continue to send a positive message to today's youth. Thank you. And thank you for coming to another episode of the Philly Old Head Review. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video. Take care until next time.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.